Hey guys, this episode we have a special guest, Kasper Timm Hansen from the Rails core team, and we are sitting down to review a pull request to Rails and talk about the naming and other decisions that are made when you're adding features to Rails. And so this is a really good conversation to talk about, how important it is to get naming correct and to really convey what the intentions are, and even kind of adjusting the way that the code works in this example to better create an interface for the users, the developers like us, to use in your Rails apps. So this is a great conversation, and let's dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I saw this PR a couple days ago. Apparently it's from late September, but I saw someone else from the team had looked into it a little bit and said, maybe just add a test and it seems good to go. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, maybe there's actually some things I want to dig into a little bit more here. I didn't get to say this. I put a comment below because that's just sort of how you do it. But yeah, that's me. And I didn't get to say it at the time, but I was actually like, oh wait, this is actually a pretty good write-up because it has a code sample in there. It has a distinct use case for it. So what it is that the redirect to is the important line there, and I think it's on line 4 or something. Yeah, exactly, right there. And so what this PR wants to add is in the return URL method is to add this method called save to redirect to with a question mark. And then you pass it in a URL string from the web, essentially, in the params there. And so Rails already has some sort of facility to do this internally, but we just have never made that API public. So this is what this PR wants to do, and it's leveraging. You can see this in the paragraph down below here. Can I? Oh yeah, can I? Yeah, it's using something called URL host allowed. And so I just wanted to double check some of the stuff here and see maybe if there's a slightly different name we want to do it, if there's a slightly different way we want to scope certain things or not. So that's sort of it for me, essentially. Because once I started looking at the code and there isn't that much code difference here. We can go to, I'll just click on files changed.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and also lovely here with a changelog entry and everything, showing how it works and stuff. And what do we have here? Yeah, so this is where some of the stuff changed to allow this. Let me see here. Also just using it, but here's where it's added, and also with documentation there, which is also good. But it's just using this internal.
Those up above were kind of like changing the internal use to use this new method.
Basically. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I think we could see it in the, oh yeah, you'll have that on the right side. Yeah, because it was just calling the internal method before, and now it's just changed to use the new method, essentially. Gotcha. Yeah, so already this is kind of interesting that it passes in this allow other host variable in there. That's interesting, because I guess I would not do that exactly. Yeah, this is also reads a little bit weird, but this means that it's reading from a class level thing that's set somewhere. I don't remember where. It's probably first assigned to a config, and then that config is copied over to, I guess, an attribute accessor on action controller or something like that. Yeah, so I think the first thing
And the idea behind this is to, protect somebody from redirecting to the wrong domain, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's sort of what it wants to do. Yeah, it says here, note that a host includes subdomains, a location of the same domain, but a different subdomain to the request will not be considered safe. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I'd probably add an example for that too, because I don't quite understand it when I'm just reading it. Yeah. So I can't quite remember how all this URL host allowed works. That's one thing we could look into. There's a little bit of whether or not we want to use this allow other host kind of thing. That seems a little bit odd to me because it's just...
Yeah, and maybe maybe what we can do is pull up that file and find the...
Yep.
The allow other host. Where is that?
Yeah. Let's see.
Allow other
there
hosts.
It is. Okay.
So it's a method that says raise on open redirects, and then that's not sure.
Yeah, that was an attribute access. I saw it at the top of the file. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, right there,
yep.
included. Yes. Yeah, so that's a new feature that's in Rails 7, I think, where we're sort of going to guard against open redirects. And open redirects is just linking to other domains. So we'll just block that automatically. I think that's how it's going to work. I think there's an example of that here in the redirect to examples, or see, it's got to be a little bit below, I think. Isn't there? I believe there is somewhere.
Yeah, because basically this is changing it so that it's like explicitly required as an option when you do a redirect to allow that. I
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is kind of one of those things that, like, if you've ever used Brakeman on your app, that will often complain about, like, oh, you've got an open redirect like this that could be potentially abused. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, it seems like a good thing to have built in. And then let's see, redirect back does have the allow other hosts on it.
Yep.
But I didn't
think
see
lots of them allow passing this option. Yeah.
Okay. And so you just pass true or false into that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that gives us a little background on this. I didn't see one for the allow other host on redirect itself, but
it's hidden in options. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I guess in response options, but
I guess no example on it, but yeah. So then, compute safe redirect to locations, probably the one that does most of this work then, which is right here. Yeah, and then checks to see if it's a safe redirect too. Okay.
Yep. And otherwise it says unsafe redirect, use allow our host to redirect anyway. Interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like that one could be even changed a little bit, where it's like, allow other host true or something to like show you exactly what to pass to the method.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on, the implementation here, and then like because I think it makes sense, and is kind of probably what you would do on a first draft of this, where like you'd give it a method name and you would write something like this, where it's like, well, it's kind of what we're asking for, and is an easy name to assign to it. But I think you're hinting at, there's a better way we can maybe think about this or word it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but it was more just, I feel like there's something here I just want to double check essentially and see if there's something we could get at that might show some of these things a little bit better. Because already when we're just looking at a lot of the other code we just saw, I'm kind of like, there's a lot of stuff going on here, both with redirect to, then there's redirect back or to, which is a new version of redirect back, and all of them take this allow the host option in there. So I just feel like there's a ton of stuff going on here. And then this safe to redirect to, which is this PR is attempting to add, is also allowing that option to allow other hosts. So it's a lot of stuff that's going on here.
Yeah.
So I think part of what I want to check at is just make sure I understand what's going on.
Right.
Because I find some of this allow other host stuff and how it's written kind of a little bit, because it's getting passed around a lot, and it's not sort of in everything kind of takes that option, which is in many ways is fine. It's just a little bit, I don't know. So now we're adding an extra method that also takes that option and does something slightly different there. So that's
I agree,
on one side, on the implementation side. But.
And I feel like, just simply the fact that the example shows, extracting a method just to create a conditional on the two options, it seems, sort of like there should be I could imagine more like this should be internal to Rails maybe, and maybe if there was either redirect to is automatically going to check for safety, and you pass in a fallback,
which it does now,
something.
but yeah.
because it reminds me of like the redirect back with the fallback location where you're now trying to supply two things. One's dynamic, and then one is like your safety version of it. And you don't want to have to pull that out into your code. It doesn't need to be there. It should be in, the redirect to method itself. And maybe this example is a bit more of just an example of where you could use it, but
I think it's good enough to have what do you call it? Like a realistic enough example. You have this looks like a perfectly fine controller to write in a lot of ways. But yeah, so there's a number of things I want to look at around both the naming of it and the specific scope of it and stuff. So what I tend to do here is, now that there is a use case, I just copy that into a new file and then start poking around at it and writing stuff a little bit differently and seeing where that's sort of going to take me and see if it has any ideas, or maybe do this differently. And then it's going to lead to all kinds of ways to look at stuff. That's how I tend to work on it, And if there was no controller here, I'd sort of write my own little thing or whatever.
Like your own example.
Yeah, exactly. Just to have enough of a surrounding a part to sort of help guide it or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to do that now? We can copy this into...
Yeah, I'd do that, yeah. If you have somewhere.
Are you familiar with Vim, or should we use VS Code?
Either one's probably fine, yeah. I tend to use Atom, but,
Okay. We'll use VS Code and...
Perfect.
Make a little test file here.
Super.
It's been a while since I've opened VS Code, so...
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, so, I wonder where we could start. We could start with I think there's probably going to be some stuff around that whole allow other host thing and how all of that works, and then the internal implementation of this safe to redirect to. But I think for now, maybe it's a little bit looking at different ways to just scope this stuff right at sort of, what the user would see. Because if we just merge the PR as is, this is what it would look like in that person's app, once they've upgraded to the next version of Rails and all that. So already I'm kind of, when I'm seeing here with the naming of it itself, I'm kind of a little bit like, it's interesting that it uses safe to redirect to. It's sort of, so immediately what perks up for me is both I think it's a perfectly fine start, but it reads a little bit clunky to me because there's lots of words here, and then there's the safe to redirect to, so there's the two twos in there, so it has a little bit of an interesting naming to it. I find that it makes it hard for my brain to process it, because it's like I end up asking the question of, wait, what is it we're asking here? And it ends up reading a lot, and then there's also this whole if statement around it. So immediately what I'm thinking of is it's similar to, I have to be in insert mode, I guess. Press I? Perfect.
I tricked you because my VS Code is also in Vim mode, so...
Oh, perfect. Let's see here.
You didn't really get an option of not to use Vim, so...
yeah, you tricked me. Okay, so what I'm thinking of is something like what you typically do sometimes is use press send, and then you do this, and then you do the reading again, and then you do this thing, and then you do root URL. But then there's the other method. So this is sort of what this similar code reads as. It reminds me of when you do present.
Absolutely.
And then you sort of read the same thing twice. But what it reminds me of too is also that there's also the method of presence. Which means you can do this part and then just avoid the whole if. So I'm kind of wondering if you want to have something along those lines. So you can essentially make it a one-liner, and then you can pass it maybe directly if it's short enough, or you can, extract it out to somewhere else and then put it a little bit closer to the call side. If you have many methods that want to use this return URL, then maybe this is fine enough to sort of extract it out to one place. But for this one case, I sort of want to have something that's a little bit more condensed, so you can sort of put it at the front of where it is, kind of, especially when it just defaults to root URL. I kind of want to know that, I think.
Yeah.
So let me hear of this thing first. So that's sort of what I'm seeing with it. So I want something that's either let me just write this in and see where that's going to take us. Let's see, valid redirect. I cannot spell. Location. And then if we do this part, And then potentially we could do this thing, and then we can also do this thing, and then do root URL, and then remove the other parts, or I said redirect. That could be one potential version of it.
I
and
think it reads a lot more directly that way.
Yeah.
Where it's not asking a question anymore. It is saying, give me a valid redirect location. I don't care how you have to do it. Just give me one, instead of asking for permission and then, you know, deciding what to do with it. I like that little shift of, you know, I don't know how to describe that exactly, but shifting from asking a question to giving a directive, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're almost doing two things at once in the other. At least it's enough that it breaks the flow for me, where I'm kind of like, so what do we, especially when we're reading from the params twice, it's kind of, and just putting that in a local variable wouldn't change it much, because it's still, it feels too heavy for what it is we're doing here in that case. So yeah, this could be a potential version of it. And this is also playing around a little bit with some naming here, because before it said safe to redirect to, and now it's sort of valid redirect, but it's also saying location, because that's a little bit closer to, that's essentially what you pass here in redirect to. Oh, you can see my cursor, right?
Yep.
It's purple aligned. Okay, and it's scrolling around and everything. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's good. I like those like subtle nuances there, because you know, if you have the method that returns true or false, you pretty much have to make it a question. But this is one where it's like, look, we're going to return you a value or nil. And I think that valid like prefix there helps emphasize that piece. And then, yeah, location can be just a path or a, you know, URL, a full URL. So location kind of encompasses both of those as well.
Yep. So there's another thing to look at now, is whether or not valid is a good idea to name it that, because there is something here around safety, and there's something around all that naming and allow other host, which is another thing I wanted to look at with this particular code here, is that we're starting to add a lot of words in here, and sort of right now, if we just keep it to this with valid, I think it's better because it gets it down to one line, but it's also adding more verbiage here. So now there's both this redirect to, and then there's also location has been used a little bit before, but then what does valid mean exactly here? Because it can still be valid to redirect externally, for instance. So that's another thing we could potentially look at here, like you were talking about with having redirect do some of this, because it could be external redirect to, for instance, could be something like that.
Yeah.
Kind of, but there's then the fallback stuff. And I've never liked the fallback. What was it? I'm just going to write it out with the spelling errors here.
Redirect back, fallback location. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the other thing I'm seeing when I'm seeing a lot of those allow other host options. Because to me, having something like this potentially, or it could be named slightly differently, is a little bit clearer than connected to, I cannot duplicate the line with that comment. Let me see here. Oh, is there a shortcut?
If you type YY and then P, it'll copy the line and paste it.
Oh yeah, you yank it and you paste. Yeah, that's right. Okay,
exactly.
See if it just because this reads a little bit clearer to me than let's see. Oh, and then we're out of insert mode. Yep. Okay. Let's see here. It's been a while since so this reads clearer to me than allow other host.
Yeah,
you know,
because it doesn't really. I think using the word external feels very clear that it's no longer my host anymore, or the one we're currently on at least. And allow other hosts does not, for whatever reason, explain that as well to me when I'm reading it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think what it wants to present, this allow other host option, is sort of the safety aspect of this. That it's dangerous to link to an external host, especially one that just grabbed from params, because then somebody could just, plug in some sort of a phishing site or whatever. Then you're, I guess, off to the races or whatnot.
Yeah, and
so
and
I like
really. Would you say you would assume that anytime you're redirecting to an external location, you're probably you want to be explicit about that, right? Like,
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes sense to call it out essentially in the
because
frame
it's
here.
probably pretty rare for you to do a redirect that is to, some other host. Maybe it's, I mean, Stripe checkout's a good example of like we redirect to the Stripe checkout page, but that's one where like that you're redirecting to some other domain, Stripe's domain in that case, and like that will be very clear in your controller that, yeah, it is not our current domain. And I guess partly too, with a comment on that is like, you can build in the safety into the method call this way so that redirect to could maybe never allow external hosts, but external redirect could always do that check or something.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's also because that's essentially how redirect 2 will work on new Rails 7 apps. Because it's going to have that other config we saw, allow open redirects. I think that's going to be false by default in new Rails 7 app. So if you generate an app on Rails 7, then it's going to be false. And so redirect 2 is essentially going to be an internal redirect only, unless you pass that allow other host option.
Oh, that's nice. I think that's a very good safe default. And like all of those errors that you find when you run Brakeman are generally around this, where you redirected, but you didn't verify or whatever.
Yeah. But I still think there can be a purpose to having this kind of check here, because how would you do the fallback here? My other thought would be to have something like this, where you could then, I'm still having this, where you could do this and then say or2, for instance.
Yep, that's what I was thinking too. Like,
but then it also becomes a little bit, this is also reads a little bit odd in some ways, because what is it we're trying to get at here? We have a sign-ins controller. Oh yeah, and then we have a return to. Yeah, so we want to redirect back to a particular place, right? So in this case, this actually does make sense, except it's also odd that this is an external reader. Oh, right. It's because in that case, they want to. I'm just falling back on what the example actually is here, but it's right. Yeah, because the return to, they need to validate a return to, of course. Yeah. And so this is interesting. This actually means we wouldn't want this to be an external redirect too.
We wouldn't. Well, interestingly, like if you had this method, you wouldn't need this at all, because you would just have params return to here. And this, I don't know if or is descriptive enough, because it's sort of the like, it's like, sort of like, if it's unsafe, redirect to here instead. And so like you would want some sort of safety thing there, or I guess you wouldn't even. Would you even need the or at all if you're saying, hey, we know it's going to be an external redirect? Do we even need an or there?
Right. Yeah. In the case where it's just an external redirect to, I actually don't think you'd want to pass a fallback, because you wouldn't want to link back into the app. You'd want to redirect to some place else and then let the person go wherever they need to. But this is interesting, because that's interesting, because that sort of breaks the example here, because we actually don't want to make this an external redirect, because this is still keeping it within the app. We just want to be able to pass an external URL to go to.
So do you think? Okay, so because it is getting away from the original example, which is like we want to redirect to return to if it's provided and it's safe.
Yep.
And we could extract a method for external redirects. But it almost makes you wonder about doing, say, like, I could almost envision like an external redirect to this location, or redirect to the return URL or something.
Oh, that's interesting. You just copied a redirect to.
And this may not be a great idea or whatever, because this would have to return nil or something in that case.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
It seems kind of it seems kind of interesting that you could say, hey, we want to explicitly redirect to wherever. Otherwise, it needs to just be a local redirect of some sort.
Yep, yep.
But
It's interesting because it reminds me of another thing I've sometimes thought about trying to extract, which is doing what do you call it? Oh, I'm so terrible at it. I've forgotten everything.
so
Was it you?
Yeah, if you hit I or
then we're back in insert, right?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't remember anything, but this is another thing I've sometimes thought about. Yeah, I've sometimes thought about doing something like this, where instead of having something called return to, you essentially pass in a handoff URL. So this is sort of trying to make something that's a little bit more, or you say sort of a little bit more abstracted or something. But it's something I've been thinking about before, because it's most typical in these sign-ins where you do want to have a specific place that you either return to or go to, like the default. But sometimes there's also other places in controllers where it could be some sort of ordering thing or whatnot, where you just want to redirect to a different controller and can participate in a flow there and then take people back to something. So I've been wondering about having something kind of like this that then bakes it in that you want to either read from a params called handoff URL. So it's a little bit more standard how you do that kind of handoff thing.
That would be really cool, because there's a lot of times, and obviously the like sign in and redirect you back to the previous page is a very good example of that, but wizards and other things can be a use case for that.
Yeah. And so the other thing I'd have to match that would be to, since it say stores handoff URL. You could say here, in case we only want it on create action, we could have it like that. And then the idea is you could also store it in the session. So if, for instance, if you have a longer flow that carries over multiple actions or potentially maybe other controllers or something, you could have it put in at the first part of, let's say that the Sinex controller also had a new action. So you're first shown the sign-in page,
Yep.
and then you would store the handoff URL to eventually use it in the create. So the redirect to would then expect there to be a handoff URL, or potentially like the root URL or something like that, as a fallback.
Yeah, I like that, because a simple, more complex sign-in with two-factor authentication, you may end up going through sign-in 2 or 3 times. If they've forgot their password, they're gonna go to like create, and then they're gonna go to the two-factor page, and that might fail the first time or whatever. And like, it would be very nice to have it stored in the session so that it's like more guaranteed that it didn't get lost in one of those steps along the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then just have it stored in a session to pull it back out if needed.
And I think that's how actually Devise does it when you visit a page that is like a before action authenticate user. I think they store it in the session, if I remember right, but could be wrong.
Most likely, or someplace else. They probably have some adapters to do some, maybe, I don't know.
Cool.
But this makes this sort of also takes this out of just a sign-in case, because it can be useful in other cases too, where you just want to have one controller flow that might take you through several actions, possibly different controllers even, or something across different pages. And it's just like, I just want to do one tiny thing that then involves a different controller flow and then take me back to where I was after that. So you can have sort of this multiple setup flow, for instance. It's usually in setup, I think I have a need for some of this, where you want to pass stuff around and not have to copy the controllers, but then just allow this kind of override.
That's super cool. Yeah.
So that's one thing we could do about it. That's a little bit more involved, but I think I had the code at one point, and then I sort of deleted it at some point. But I still think there's something to having this that just essentially grabs that allow other host. Well, what it called internally was, I think it was URL allowed or something like that. I still think there's something to this, and even just tweaking it a little bit to something like this is actually an upgrade.
Right. And it's basically just implementing presence, a method that returns either a valid string or nil that you can chain onto pretty easily with your OR. And going way back to what you mentioned earlier with the valid like prefix here, like what does valid mean? Because valid could be is it just a valid URL? Like, is there invalid characters in there? That isn't necessarily conveying that this is really checking for the like safety of that.
We're really saying valid internal redirect location,
or
which makes it sort of even
valid external, right?
I think in this case we want it to be it's meant to check for that it's an internal redirect.
Well,
but then the proposed method also accepted and allow other host things, so it sort of removes the whole need to even have the method.
Because I wonder, like, you sort of need the valid external one as well, wouldn't you? Or it's a better, maybe it's, you wouldn't need it, but it's a better way of like kind of just having that allow other host option is true. Where you can provide that in a bit more readable fashion or whatever.
I mean, you could make a version of that too, where you then take the same host check that's here, but then you just flip it and say, I require it to be a different host, because otherwise it's not an external redirect. So you get a little bit more of a, what do we call it? A little bit more of kind of safety there too, in some sense, at least more that you're more clear on what it is you expect to have happen here. And so you split it between the internal redirects and then the external redirects. And then since Rails 7 is just almost going to treat redirect 2 as just an internal redirect, then it makes sense to make the external part stand out a little bit more, I think, in some version. Maybe not exactly for this case, like we looked at up here, but yeah, there's still something to this. That's just like, how do I grab something from a param and then, check that it's valid and then let me redirect to that, or, let me redirect to another place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. The other thing I'm also just want to see how that looks is essentially to, what if we actually remove the params here and just sort of already, what if we just say, I'm just going to write here. Now it's going to be very wordy, but that's the place to start. And then whoop. And then it would also have the root URL here behind it. So that I don't know if this is the right path or something. I just wanted to see it written out. And of course now it's extremely wordy, but that's the place to start with it. Because sometimes I think it could be interesting to make these kinds of methods that are slightly more scoped or something, where you're already baking it in how you're supposed to use it, where things are supposed to come from or something. Because now it says that it can be, you can also make the case in an example in a documentation and just have an example where something is passed in from params, but you can also kind of bake that into a method name. And be like, it's just, this is only meant to, it's okay to pass stuff in from params. You could just got to use this kind of method to help validate what you pass in or something. I don't think it actually adds that much. That's kind of interesting, but yeah.
And like this takes a little bit of questions of like, where is this going to pull from and whatever. But it also, like, I don't know if there's ever a case or maybe someone has, I don't know, a constant with some various strings that they might pass in here or whatever. This version would be a little bit more flexible.
Yep.
And this would be
stored in a session.
Yeah. So, that would be a little bit more coupled to the params. And also, I guess that would be more, I don't know if this would be useful in other areas, but the params one would be more controller focused, whereas you could use this pretty much anywhere.
True, yeah.
You know, so that's interesting. But I mean, this could be as simple as like a wrapper on this method that's call that method.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, send the params in, key name, and you're pretty much good to go. So it wouldn't be much to add that other method. But yeah.
So it's a little bit more about what we want to expose. So now I think I'm back to a little bit looking at, I think the handoff stuff, I still think it's interesting. I've had it on my list to look at sort of forever, but it's also a little bit of a lot sometimes. And I think it could work both in the assignment case and in more general cases. But I also think there's something to having just a method that's sort of like this, but then quantifying a little bit more what valid means, and that it's just an internal redirect.
I agree, because if we go back to this example, like safe to redirect to is basically just guarantee me that this is an internal route, like current domain or just a relative path. As long as you didn't give me some external URL, that's what this is really getting at. And safe to redirect to does not really convey that. It just says,
no, exactly.
You know, what is safe in this case, and we don't know. And I very much like the, you know, internal redirect location. Here's a question for you. Do we need the word redirect in here? It is kind of relative in these examples to redirecting, and I guess partly the unsafe URL protection. But I was kind of curious, like, what if it's just a valid internal location method that returns you that? And, you know, those could be relative to anything. It wouldn't have to be redirects. You might use it in your JSON API responses or something.
Yeah, I actually like the way that sounds. I'm curious, when would you use that in an API?
Some of them have, like, you know, when they return pagination or something, you might have a relative link there for the next page or something that you could use, or, you know, I'm not sure entirely. Or maybe you use it in your, views, and you have like the data source or something, and you want to just make sure that it's rendering your Hotwire frame, you know, with an internal location. If for whatever reason that was dynamic, which normally that won't be the case, but but it does bring up the question of, does it even have to care about whether it's related to redirects? And then you would have a little bit more of a straightforward method name here for this.
And location kind of implies a potential for redirection or something, or it's just a place you can go to. And then a place you can go to is usually something you would redirect to. That's the way you would go to that place. So they are kind of linked in that sense. Also because that's kind of what it's implied by redirect to, that you pass it as something like a location or something.
Right. Yeah, because when you call redirect to, it's implied that you can give it either a full URL or a path, and it will handle either one just fine. And so internal location is better being a little bit generic, calling it a location and not a path or a URL or whatever. It should support both and give you, you know, either one back or validate either one is safe.
And now it's also interesting when I just remembered that also means that you can pass in a hash here.
Where at?
Like you could pass in a hash here, and then instead of saying params, because we sort of want to mirror what redirect to handles. So this could also be, what is it, like action show or something? I've never used this, and I think it's an old style Rails version.
Absolutely.
But the method that was there in the safe to redirect to doesn't handle that case exactly. Well, I think it's because the internal URL allowed or something doesn't handle that case, which is interesting.
Yeah, because this points out that it could be a very simple, like, URL4 wrapper that says, we'll call URL4 on whatever params you give us, and then we'll check its safety, and that's it. or not safety, internal, external, I guess, is a better way of, because really drill down from what is safe, and safe is the difference between internal and external in this this case here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I think that would be a really ideal situation, because then you have the flexibility to do whatever. People could upgrade to this probably a bit easier, you know, because if they did have an old app that was using some of these, I tend to use paths and everything.
Me too.
I don't know the last time I've actually used, just an action or a controller name, but it would be more backwards compatible that way.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a bit, because I've never liked the fact you can do this stuff, and it's almost feels self-deprecated to me or something, because I just find it a little bit sometimes tough to read or something. I mean, I get it in render. You can say render new, and you could also say, I think you can also say redirect to : show, for instance.
And I assume that like internally render new kind of says like, hey, we already know your controller name, so we'll just do controller in action, and
we have the prefixes there that it's in the app use sign-ins, and it just renders the new template.
So I'm with you. Like, it does feel like it was soft deprecated, because I never see anybody doing that hardly at all.
Oh, and also I just realized it kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, because we're passing a hash from inside, and we're checking whether or not this is a valid internal location, but we control everything we just passed. So either we'd have to provide a param here, whether or not it's a valid action to redirect to. And at that point, I think it would be better for someone else to just go in and make it say, oh, it can only be show or new or something, so that we don't own that. Yeah, so I actually think I'm coming around to the fact that we don't need to support this case. Or some of the other hash versions. I think redirect to has some examples of what it can do. I can never remember, which might be good to look at too.
Maybe we'll pull that up here.
Just to double check,
Oops. So, yeah.
Oh, you can also pass it a proc. Okay, perfect.
Of course. So, models or whatever.
Yep. Oh, there's different actions there,
Yeah. So it kind of feels like it would be, because this is just generating the URL for you, whether you're passing in a model instance or a hash or a string. You could pass in just the string for the path or whatever, and that would work fine. But the method signature for here is, I guess, just options, and then this could get, instead of a hash, it's a string or whatever for for those. So it kind of has to do that. And this extract and compute stuff was already in this same file and everything, so it's like readily accessible for us, which is good. Because I feel like it would be interesting to have the ability to do the same things, where it's kind of a wraparound, or it's kind of implemented with the same interface between them, where and I think it feels a little better than you wouldn't need this as much, because this would be more obvious that you could pass in your params or whatever into that. You would probably for sure want to include an explicit param return to example, so that it would showcase the reason this method exists is for the dynamic methods that get passed.
And I wouldn't actually even support this case, because I mean, in this case, we're just passing our own values in there, so we know it's valid.
Well, yeah,
this doesn't come from the user. It comes from the developer. And then, if you have to validate your developers, I guess it's a little bit different. But the only way I could see is then you would have to pass in allow accepting a hash from the web that then has an action and blah, blah, blah. But that could sort of take you to anywhere in your app, which doesn't sound right either.
True. Very true.
It's the same with the params return too, kind of.
Yeah, because you would not want this to be someone passing in params here, and then they could supply their own action and controller and ID or whatever. That would be dangerous. So it is probably not a bad idea just to say, oops, this requires a string of some sort.
Yeah, I think I would. That makes me feel, it's just because there's less things to worry about when we're adding this stuff, because all the safety stuff is just, it gets to your head very quickly.
Well, and there's no reason you couldn't just do a URL for action show right there and pass that in. Like, then you're not introducing another vulnerability case or location that could cause a problem. So, yeah, I think that makes much more sense. It's much safer for the implementation not to care about, replicating URL for or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Because then let's maybe go back to our use case here was kind of, we wanted to have a redirect to return URL. And I think this is pretty solid because then, we can go and put this inline. We don't need the private method really anymore. And it's much clearer to say redirect to a valid internal location or the homepage. That seems awful straightforward, and it's not super wordy, and also doesn't introduce options or anything, which I think is nice. They'll allow other hosts and stuff it's hard to make those descriptive enough for the use case.
Yeah, so that's also the other thing sometimes. Instead of going by what's technically happening, it's about finding the word that's ever so slightly different to sort of highlight what we want, kind of. Because the stuff around host and things do make sense because that's what's happening. And we are allowing another host, but what is it really we're doing? And that's where it ends up becoming clear for me to say, oh, it's the difference between internal and external. And so once that's there, I start to be able to see stuff in my mind kind of about, oh, so everything is actually, it means once we have the word internal, that means we can actually rewrite the redirect to documentation to talk about, to frame everything as supposedly for the majority of the time being internal redirects. You only want to send people around your app. And then there's going to be some cases where you probably want to redirect externally or something like that in the other case, but that's not what we're doing right here. But I feel better about having this kind of language in here that's sort of, and I think we could even have, redirect to also does the validation in case you don't with this method. But it could also use this internally. And it could do its own, allow other host check or whatnot, because if we passed allow other host to redirect to, we could just skip this check based on what's passed in,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's we touched on external redirect to, and you can imagine an internal redirect to, that could do this automatically, where you could say params return to, but then it kind of requires a fallback of root URL or something.
Yeah, that's the trouble with some of these where, you sort of want to be able to pass this one first and then pass a fallback somewhere, but it usually ends up reading so odd or something.
Yeah.
That's where I like the version of what was it? What's it called now? It's called it's redirect back or to. It's a slightly different naming for stuff. So it uses the redirect back functionality, or you can pass it directly there. But that's, it's coming from somewhere else.
Right, and it only takes one argument
yeah.
because it came from the headers or whatever.
Yeah, so the tough part is the stuff where you want to pass 2 arguments.
Yeah.
How do you sort of show that or something? And then there's sometimes in other Ruby stuff you'd make it pass a fallback block or something, but that's also a little bit I mean, I guess you could make this, for instance, look like do, and then you could do in here and say end there. That could be a different version of some of the stuff, but that also ends up reading sort of a little bit, because if this was down here, that would be, I don't know. But that's also tough to sometimes show what does the fallback mean here or something,
Yeah, the block doesn't give it any sort of description. It's just a block, and an option name helps, but it isn't as readable.
Yeah. But actually, now that we have, if on Rails 7 that all redirect 2s are internal, we could actually just bake this in and do what you said earlier of having redirect 2, for instance, return nil if it's not a valid location. And then you could do the redirect 2 over here. So you sort of split them up.
Yeah. Is that a breaking change though? Like, calling redirect 2, you usually would expect that's going to redirect somewhere. And if I was to write, say, redirect to,
because it would end up rendering a response. Right, that doesn't work.
Because then, like, if you forgot to pass in the or something, if this doesn't do anything, then like you're going to get a no response rendered or whatever thing, and that would be that wouldn't quite work.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, these are really interesting like problems because they're so I don't know. It's like writing an essay or something where you're thinking about how do I convey this concept clearly. And when you're talking in terms of Rails or whatever, like you want this to be clear because there are thousands and thousands of people going to be using this stuff, and you don't want it to be unclear to the majority of people because that'll be a lot of tickets and stuff. So
it will also be a lot of wasted brain space. Yeah. Where if it's tough for us to think about when we're making it, but then we don't do enough thinking or however you want to put it or something, then that means we're just we're essentially doing what is it, like client-side development or whatever, because the clients here are the developers and they'd have to execute it on their own brain rather than us figuring out how to name these things. And that's where it gets tough sometimes. Like you can see it here, we've been doing 5 or 6 different versions of stuff, and I'm still kind of like And that's sometimes what happens too, where you end up you do want to explore all this stuff and see what comes out of it. And now it's at the point where I'm kind of like, I wonder if we should actually just wait a little bit on some of this. At the very least, I tend to want to sleep on some of these things. So it's just like, I don't know exactly which way to go. And there's a ton of different versions of this. But right now, I'm actually a little bit unsure about making this a public API right now, this valid internal location. I like where it's going. Just a little bit about how some of the implementation works, especially around that allow other host stuff. I think I get how that works, but I can just tell it feels too complex for my brain, at least, to process it. Maybe to check what that thing does. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah. So just just compares with request host.
That's simpler than I expected it to be, but
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, and that's also my other thought about it. Where is it too simple? Do we need other checks for it or something? I guess we just need the host check and then rely on URI to be able to parse the host properly.
So what happened? Well, I guess maybe that never gets called if it's just a relative path instead. I was just wondering that because or maybe this, I guess.
Yeah,
if you had a relative path, it wouldn't have.
Yeah, if you find I think there was a method that was called compute safe redirect to location. It's above that one. Oh, not that. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so you can see it basically always checks whether or not it's safe to redirect to, but then unless this allow the host is passed in, which then just copies whatever is here and then skips the check. So that's also another thing I just do right away, is just make sure that it's safe to redirect to. If that's the way we'd go with, wouldn't support this allow other host option, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because this is essentially this is kind of a fancy version of just skipping this check entirely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if allow other host is true here, then the method that it calls here is where is it here? So this would be true. So this is true, or actually run the check, which means that it just skips itself.
Gotcha.
You know, and then even it also supports the allow other host sort of global option, which means that you can just completely nullify ever needing to use this, which is again why it makes sense to rename some of this the safety here to actually reframe it to be about internal redirects, because that means you obviate all the need to consider all this stuff with the other host and so forth. I mean, you want to check it, but you don't have to support that option.
Does the internal external wording get to be a bit incorrect if you're building an app that does allow redirecting to an external location? Like, is that maybe why it was originally safe? Where in some apps it might be safe to redirect to a different domain, but I guess
potentially.
I guess in the case of like Rails, redirect to like out of the box, you're gonna want that to be always internal, unless explicitly said otherwise.
Yeah, I think so.
So that, yeah, okay.
At least that would be my take on it, that for the most part you want to make these systems that sort of revolve around themselves. I could barely say that sentence, but yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And that's also sometimes where some of these reviews sometimes end up devolving into people just going, because there's something that's a little bit missing, or there's something that's not, I don't know, clicking entirely right, or it's just that it's pointing to, there's a lot here. And so it's just, I don't know, it's at a point where I'm starting to get a little bit like, a little bit uncomfortable with some of this, where I feel like I don't understand all the stuff, and I feel like I don't understand the allow out of host stuff as much. I think that's only in Rails 7, so there's a part of me that's kind of wanting to look a little bit at that, and maybe potentially removing it from certain places. I mean, obviating the need to pass the option, and maybe that could be one thing to look at too, at some point, but probably not too far, because I think the alpha is already out or something.
Yep, alpha.
But yeah,
alpha 2.
So, yep. So it's definitely getting close if there's anything to look at about that. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It definitely gets really tough. I think, even if it was, I guess it's other hosts, even if it was maybe allow external host, it would read better to me.
Yeah.
Because other doesn't really tell me anything.
Yeah. But that's also where it makes sense to start defining what's the difference between internal and external. And the fact that it's only on the host would then become clearer, because you could then quantify that in documentation. So I think you could even just trim this entire option down to external. So it would be redirect to location, external, true or false.
Yeah.
But then it might be clearer to have one that's called external redirect to.
Sure.
There's also a different language that's being used internally here. That's where is it here? It's URL. No, where was it? Yeah, race on open redirects. Yeah.
Which is probably a better description of the security vulnerability there.
Yeah, exactly. That you just want to make sure you can't just redirect to any place, and then because that's essentially what it is. Yeah, it's a closed redirect. That's a great way of putting it too.
Yeah, and that feels like a more, I think a more layman term for the internal external redirects fits for how you would want Rails to expose it versus
Yeah.
like open and closed redirects feels much more technical and would
Yeah.
be a little bit harder to wrap your head around, like, what does this mean? You would kind of
Yeah.
understand that you would probably understand intuitively that it's a security related thing, but it doesn't feel as friendly that way.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it doesn't speak back to you, kind of, to me at least. It's just like once I see the word open there, I'm like, well, I guess everything's open. Like, I don't know how to sort of route it back into my brain about. I just see my thought go into some sort of open space and like, yeah, okay, everything's open. And I'm like, okay, there's redirects. Okay, so it's like I see an open field or something. I'm like, I don't know where to go here. Kind of.
Yeah.
A little bit. And again, not to I think the work is great. We're getting this kind of feature in here. And having that validation on by default. It's going to be a new framework
Definitely.
default, so you can toggle it on when you're upgrading from like Rails 6.1 or where we're at now to 7. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, this is a very welcome change and, a good way to protect you from shooting yourself in the foot on accident
Yep.
if you ever added a redirect to some user supplied location, then, you're much safer now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think all of that was like very, very useful to think through. And then of course it's one of those, like many programming situations that you find yourself in, like you're fairly happy with the direction it's heading, but you're not completely sold on this should be the final version.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, the other thing I just thought about was you can also have a maybe potentially you could do. I'm just going to write it out like this kind of thing. Because do we really care at that? No, wait, we want the. God damn it.
Yeah, I had this thought earlier and it slipped my mind. That makes a lot of sense. Or I guess this could be like internal redirect to or something because you would have to probably change the redirect to method itself if you pass an array like that. But if you had one like this, it kind of, I guess, because
I think it could actually be really interesting to have redirect 2 from the now on actually be implemented based on that whole allow other host switch. And if it's true, you actually call external redirect 2. If it's not true, you call internal redirect 2. So redirect 2 is really just calling either of these two based on that class level setting. Sorry, I cut you off.
That. Yeah. Yeah, because this well, and I thought about this a little bit ago. A lot of times, like, we think about, grabbing a value from a hash and having a fallback, value with, like, say, fetch or something.
Yep.
And this is not at all something that would work for it because the redirect 2 needs to check multiple things instead of, you have no way of, you need the actual original value here immediately before you can do that. So a fetch kind of approach wouldn't, work there.
Yeah.
But this isn't, again, it's one of those cases where it's like, what does this mean? Or does the method name need to imply that you give it an array of things?
Right. Or just have an example that reveals that you can.
Yeah.
Because I think it almost kind of makes a certain sense that you would be able to. I feel like at least when I just read this stuff, it reads as very readable. Great. But that what do you call it? That it kind of makes sense to me that if this doesn't work, then we just fall back to something else, and you don't almost need to spell it out. And that's
Yeah.
where it gets rough when you have to try to provide this extra option, either a fallback or an or two or something. And so, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it implies passing in an array is going to loop through them until it finds the correct one or one that works. So
yeah, yeah,
it just is more, it's just, I guess, explained by the syntax, of the concept of an array implies that that's how it will be treated. So it's kind of intuited that way.
yeah. Try the first one, then keep going until you find one that's valid, and then it's your job as a developer to provide a URL that's valid. You know, I
Yeah,
don't know right now if you pass an array and if it's just going to try to put that into URL4. I think it will, but
probably.
you know, yeah. So
And
that's
that
the
would
other thing
be,
too. Some of the older code or something.
yeah, and that would be another example of like, if you don't want to break redirect to, you would have to introduce a new method for this, or
Yeah.
that's part of the flag of how it gets treated. If the new stuff is turned on, then you could use the array differently than in the past or something. But
Yeah, so I think what I would want to try to look at, maybe not right now, because I can tell I'm a little bit like, but I think there's something around this whole internal and external, and then sort of routing that back into the existing code, and then seeing how that would actually look like,
yeah,
as sort of a little bit more of a healthy foundation or something. And I think that that might reveal something else about what we need in this case. Um, because I
yeah,
don't like that it already feels pretty hard to get to a conclusion about what we're doing right here. It feels like that means we're basing some of this on these shaky concepts. And so once it's already shaky, we're sort of like just shaking it up a little bit more. And it makes it even harder to deal with in the future if we want to do something else with this or add a little bit more or something. And redirect to is already fairly complex in terms of what it is that it sort of does and what it supports and all these options. But yeah,
right, yeah, because it's kind of take a step back, imagine what it could be like if we could start from scratch, and what the ideal version of this would be like if, now that we have like our better terminology that we can approach this with, what would it look like from scratch, and then can we figure out a way to move it in a compatible way with, the stuff that we do have, versus trying to hack around that and come up with a new
yeah, yeah.
approach.
Which is always where it's super difficult if you're it's also super difficult when you're when you've been doing it for a while or something, but it's also super difficult to come in like fresh off the boat or whatever and being a new contributor and go into all this stuff and like or just add stuff. And I think the person who wrote this initial version here did a great job of finding a place to insert some of these things in there, and actually come up with a fairly great name for it. I think Safe to Redirect too, given the other language that we have in there, is actually a pretty great start for it.
It
Um,
is. It definitely is. Like
how, yeah,
it it's one of those where it named it about as perfectly as you could, without having to rethink the whole thing, and
yeah, yeah,
that's
exactly, yeah.
that's where we're at, where it's like, oh, you know what, you pulled on the string and it looks like everything's unraveling and we could do it better.
Totally, yeah, yeah. And but that just highlights where there's parts that are either missing or already sort of some drift in the language. There's both the allow to host, and then there's the open redirects, and then there's each of those are sort of an attempt to fix different things. And then it's just like, but there's no foundation where you then like, oh, this follows naturally that we're now just kind of it makes sense to then base something else off of this or something like that, for instance. I
Yeah,
got a little bit abstract, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I follow you. Yeah, it is. It's definitely one where it's helpful to have. I mean, we have our good sign in example here, but thinking about all the apps that you've built and redirect use cases that you've had in them helps kind of give you ideas on what are things we have to support, and how could we have made that code clearer, I think. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it helps make it a little bit more concrete, because it can definitely become very, very abstract.
Yeah, as it kind of did here in some sense. But I think it was kind of necessary to take all these extra detours and just explore the whole space, kind of. I feel like I get a lot of the stuff around here more and what's needed and where to take it. But I think I also need to like process it a little bit more.
Yep, yeah.